Thank you very much, Frank. I look at the faces of the stellar people around this table, and I realize that there's a vast amount of knowledge here, and so I'm going to try to speak into that vast amount of knowledge by putting it in a certain kind of a perspective. And but first I'd start with this, that it encourages me that we now are talking about a victory against radical Islamic Jihad. And so much of this has been about containment, about some type of defensive maneuvers and being prepared with enough intel that we can continually be lucky all the way through the course of history. And I am of the mind, and have been for some time, and I'm seeing these ideas form now in this country, that we're starting to finally have the discussions about how to establish a lasting victory over the jihadis who believe it's their calling to try to kill us. And if you watch the expansion of Western civilization, and I look around the world and I tie that together now, and I've been doing some things as far as traveling, but if you go clear down to Oceania and you say the New Zealanders and the Aussies, they're part of Western civilization. All of Western Europe is part of Western civilization. Great chunks of Eastern Europe are, and you can go to Moscow and ask them, are you East or are you West? And they will say, we're not sure, which means there's hope if they're not sure. And so that tells me there's a foundation of our belief system, and the history of that goes back a long ways, back to Moses. And I won't give the discussion about all the foundation of what is Western civilization, but I don't want to leave out the Western Hemisphere when I talk about Western civilization. The entire Western Hemisphere is rooted in Western Civ. And so now I've described a huge, vast area of the planet that we are rooted on with our belief system. And how did we spread that way? Because our ideas are more powerful than theirs. And they have been attacking us. If I look back through history, maybe on average about once a century, there has been a large battle that has settled, at least for a time, the fight between radical Islamic Jihad and the beliefs and the values of Western civilization. And so I had some of these remarks this morning that I made at the breakfast that I host at Conservative Opportunity Society, of which I happen to get to say hi to Newt Gingrich on the way in. He's one of the founders of that back in 1984. And I went back and said 732 AD, Battle of Tours, when Charles Martel let the Muslim cavalry charge into the trees where they couldn't fight very well and took them on with the infantry and ended up chasing them back as far as there was somebody left to kill and left their bones on the plains. They laid there for a long time. Nobody picked those bones up, and that was the message. Don't come back again, you hear? And of course they did come back. And then there was the beginning of that word the president uttered at the National Prayer Breakfast last Thursday. That was around 1096. There are a couple words. You don't say the C word, you don't say the I word in this business. So around 1096, those excursions began back to the Holy Land. And that took a few rounds and didn't come out the greatest on our side of that. But I'd move you forward to 1529. And that would be the Siege of Vienna, where they were turned back again. And then in 1571, you had the Battle of Lepanto, the huge Armada battle in the Aegean Sea that sunk a large share of the Ottoman Turks' navy. And that turned them back again, 1571. Well, they show up again at the gates of Vienna in 1683. And to stand there and on the top of the hill at the church where they held a service with the Polish King Jan Sobieski and the three German kings' armies, and stand in that spot and look down across that valley and see and know and hear the history of what happened at the gates of Vienna. And they were within just a day or a few days of being able to, they were detonating black powder underneath the gates of Vienna and the wall. It was a walled city at the time. And the armies had to come, the Polish cavalry had to come. Western civilization, Western Christendom was saved by a Polish cavalry charge at the gates of Vienna in 1683. And Pope John Paul II went back there 300 years to the day and celebrated Mass at the same church where they prayed before they had the battle. This has gone on a long time, and we should not forget that, but we should also remember that these milestones along the way, like we went to Tripoli in 1802, but these milestones, we had to go back again because they didn't believe us the first time. These milestones along the way have been a long ways apart. It hasn't been a continual we ding them, they ding us, chattering effect of conflict that has gone on since 732. There were decisive battles that shut down radical Islamic jihad that was coming at Western civilization over and over again. And I'm suggesting that we need to put together that kind of strategy that can win this thing. I don't think we're going to win it once and for all, but I don't think we should be talking about, well, in 10 or 20 or 50 years we might find our way out of this. I think that we can put together a strategy to defeat them within the next term of the, excuse me, I should say, not necessarily the term, but within the next presidency. I want to see the next president step up and make this pitch to put together a strategy. And the strategy that we need, in my view, is this. That the kinetic action side of this thing is a bit hit and miss. And it's going to be hard to come out on top of that if that's all we're going to do. In fact, some will say impossible, and I don't like to use that word ever. But I would say this, that first it's their information warfare. The internet has given them the flexibility to carry their message out through the internet. We need to do not just defensive cyber warfare, we need to do offensive cyber warfare. And that means crank up our operations and go after on any kind of cyber communications there are. Everything they have that supports our operation should be under attack from us. We should be putting viruses into their cyber capability, and we ought to be putting misinformation in there. We should scramble their communications to where they're scared to use it for fear that we know a lot more about what they're saying to each other than they do. That's number one. Number two is go after the money the same way. Any place where there's money that's flowing, and President Bush started that process after September 11th, and to some degree it was successful. But we can do a lot more. There are international banks that are laundering terrorist money. There are countries that are facilitating and cooperating, and some of them are our allies. Any place where that money trail leads, we ought to be hard-nosed tough on that to shut down that flow of money, and that includes oil. And with bad oil prices now, that helps us. It gives us more that we can grab. So we should see this is an opportunity that should give us some optimism. We're strongly influencing all of the cyberspace because of our technology foundation we are, and the nexus of communication in the United States is. We are strongly influencing the banking. We can do that with the full force and the leadership of the United States. We need to go after the educational systems that they have. That doesn't mean take on every madrasa, but it does mean that we have to be aware of all of the education that is educating their next generation to attack us. And we need to begin to shut that down at this country to set the example, and then diplomacy with other countries and other efforts. Also, the moderate Muslim countries, Egypt, for example, UAE is another one, Jordan is another one. By the way, all Sunni countries, that they are our allies, and we can bring them into this. Next one is expand the intel globally and put the investment in it. And all of that sets the stage then for kinetic action, the kinetic action that is necessary without limits. All of that can bring us, I believe, with a strong leader to a place where we can win this and win this for the next half a century. That's the goal I think we ought to have, and I'm glad I had a chance to describe how I look at this and appreciate the opportunity.